saw in 2000 when there was what was called the Brooks Brothers riot, where Republicans went into a courthouse in Miami-Dade County and stopped the count physically before the Supreme Court stopped the count legally. So there are many, many issues. People are on edge. They were worried about the election anyway. They're now being built up with the statements that votes are being found with statements that can't be backed up by Rudy Giuliani and others. You know, when he says Joe Biden could have voted 50 times, he knows Joe Biden didn't vote 50 times, and he is being absurd about that. But it sows division, it sows concern, and therefore that is what they are playing with. It's a very potentially volatile situation, some would even say dangerous situation. But be under no illusion, both sides know exactly what they're doing when they do this. And be under no illusion, Donald Trump knows exactly what he was doing for weeks before this, when he talked up the potential of this and the potential of the votes being stolen from him, because he was looking at the polls and things were not looking good. And if he looks at the returns now, he sees the exact same thing. His path to 270 is restricted.
Alan Fisher, thank you very much indeed. Well, Mike Hanna joins us live from Wilmington, Delaware, and that's where we heard from Joe Biden a short time ago, and he felt confident. He was saying that his path to victory was assured, but he wasn't actually declaring victory. How long do you think it will be before we get a clearer idea of whether he's made it to 270?
Well, within the last half hour, a very, very important development. A number of news outlets, as my colleague Alan Fisher just mentioned, are calling Michigan for Joe Biden. Now, this would be a huge step towards getting that 270 electoral votes, because that means if he also won Nevada, he would not need Pennsylvania at all. He would get to that magic number to get the majority in the Electoral College. So this, obviously, the campaign headquarters here absolutely watching this like hawks, and that is why the Trump campaign is contesting the vote in Michigan. It's contesting the vote in Pennsylvania. But Biden sounding confident, but making very clear that he's not claiming victory. However, he's confident that when the votes are fully counted, his campaign will win, pointing out as well that this would be only the fourth campaign in history that has successfully defeated an incumbent president. But it wasn't just about him winning or losing. Biden made an absolutely impassionate call for unity, drawing on the Constitution, referring to we the people as stated in the Constitution, saying that there's more that brings Americans together than drives them apart, saying that now is the time for unity, coming together and to heal. So with all of this, after this viciously contested election still going on in terms of all the legal challenges happening from the Trump campaign, Joe Biden still calling for unity, still insisting that this is an election that is not about Republicans or Democrats in the end. It's about the country itself. It's about the democracy, which is the very stone on which this country is built, Lauren.
And Mike, I mean, once again, the polls were pretty wide of the mark. And although the Democrats seem to be kind of edging ahead at the moment, they had appeared to have a sort of much better picture in place for several months now. What's the kind of discussion about how that those things went wrong again for the pollsters?
Well, there's a lot of soul-searching going on among Democrats. The polls did indicate very handy leads in a number of areas that have gone to Trump. Florida comes to mind in particular. But there's no doubt that what we've seen here is a pattern that we've seen in the past, and it's a pattern, it appears, that continues to befuddle the pollsters. And that is the mail-in votes and the absentee votes trend towards the Democrats. The voting on the day of people going into the booths and putting their ballot in on the day of the election tends to go towards Republicans. So this is something that has skewed the polls every single time. It skewed them in 2016 and everybody threw up their hands in horror. It skewed them now, it would appear, from the results that we've seen. All of that being said, though, the one thing that has held is that the polls indicated an absolute majority for Joe Biden in terms of the popular vote. Well, he's got a handy lead in that particular issue, unlike President Trump in 2016, who did not win the popular vote. He lost the popular vote to Clinton, although got the required number of votes in the Electoral College. So for Biden, this is the key issue in terms of the legitimacy of his victory, should he indeed be declared victor in the end. And that is the fact, is not only did he get a majority in an electoral college that many Democrats claim is skewed anyway by the gerrymandering that has happened over many years, but that he also got the majority of votes from the American people. Now, this would be critical to the legitimacy of his standing, and would also be critical in terms of carrying on what are likely to be months of contestation by the Trump campaign. We're seeing it now, the legal actions going on in Michigan, going on in Pennsylvania, threats of going to the Supreme Court to join as an applicant in cases that the Supreme Court has already decided in terms of how long a period will be allowed for the count of votes. So these are all the issues that we are still struggling with. But for Joe Biden and the Biden campaign here in Wilmington, the key issue is that he is so close, or predicted to be so close, to an electoral college victory. But most importantly is that he's projected to be very, very close to an absolute majority among the American people.
Mike Hanna, thank you very much indeed. Well, Biden has moved closer to the magic total of 270 votes, electoral college votes for the White House, adding the 10 electoral college seats from the state of Wisconsin. But the Trump campaign is already demanding a recount in that state and has filed a lawsuit to try to stop the counting of votes in another key swing state, Michigan, which is looking like it might go to Biden. Let's go to John Hendren, who's live in Lansing in Michigan. So President Trump is now seeking to halt counting in Michigan. What's he trying to achieve?
Well, President Trump is trying to stop the counting of the vote in Michigan, and a lot of self-appointed poll watchers have sort of crushed in on this central counting going on in Detroit. Police have been called in to keep them out, but with 97% of the vote counted, Joe Biden is 1.2 percentage points ahead, and the votes that remain to be counted are apparently early votes. Those break very heavily for Joe Biden, sometimes 3-1 for him. And there are also many of them in Wayne County. That's the area around Detroit. Detroit is a heavily Democratic area, majority African American. So the horse may have left the stable here for the Trump campaign, but he is trying to stop the count. And he just tweeted that he declares that he has won Michigan. I'm not sure that's how it works, but that's what the president is saying. He's claimed a number of states, and he's hoping to stop what's going on here. But just to put it into perspective, 4 years ago, Donald Trump won Michigan against Hillary Clinton by 10,000 votes. Well, this gap is more like 60,000. And last time around, Hillary Clinton did not sue to challenge that. The Green Party candidate did, and she was told that she couldn't challenge it because she hadn't got enough votes to make a credible run of it. So this is a pretty uphill battle for Donald Trump, and he'd have to go through the state courts before getting it to the Supreme Court, which is apparently his preferred venue to have this all resolved. But the bottom line is Michigan seems to be leaning very heavily toward Biden by small margin, but by what appears to be an almost unrecoverable margin. We expect that vote to continue to be counted, and the state of Michigan says they will finish counting it later. The Attorney General has said that the Trump campaign has had meaningful access to the counting. That is the basis of that challenge. The Trump campaign says they want to see the vote counting go on. The Attorney General says they've had access, and in fact, poll watchers from the Trump campaign have been seen, especially in Detroit, those heavily Democratic areas.
John Hendren, thank you very much indeed. Well, we can speak now to Andy Gallagher live in Miami. Tell us what the latest is on the count in Georgia.
Well, it's creeping along extremely slowly. About 94% of the votes have now been counted, and that gap I was talking about earlier between Biden and Trump is narrowing. Now, the key thing about Georgia with its 16 electoral college votes is The ballots that haven't been counted are mail-in ballots, which normally favors Joe Biden. And the other important thing is where those ballots are from. They're from the Atlanta area, the biggest city in the state of Georgia. A lot of African Americans in that community who also lean towards Joe Biden. So this is really narrowing the gap in a state that really shouldn't be in play. The last Democratic presidential nominee to win in that state was Bill Clinton back in 1992. So it is on a razor's edge like many other states. But this would be a big win for Joe Biden. It may not matter if Nevada and Arizona go Biden's way, but it certainly would be a huge feather in his cap given how close he is to that magic number of 270. Now, officials in the state of Georgia say that counting is underway. We've been waiting all day. It still hasn't come through, and it's 5:15 in the evening here on the East Coast. So a nail-biter once again. We are hoping to get those results in the next few hours.
And you're in Florida at the moment. Why was it so important for Trump to hold Florida? And are the Democrats sort of talking about their disappointment in not winning Florida?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, let's address the second point first, if you like, and that is if you look at what happened here in Miami-Dade County, Joe Biden just didn't manage to get any enthusiasm among Latino voters. And there are 1 million Cuban Americans in this city alone, so that's just how important they are in this state. And that was essentially because the Trump campaign pushed this idea that Joe Biden was a socialist. And when you say things like that to people from Cuba, that does not go down well. There is a great deal of fear for that kind of political leaning, despite the fact it's not true. Now, the other point is there are various paths for the president, which are closing rapidly if these projections are right, and he really needed to keep the state of Florida. He won it by about 112,000 votes back in 2016, a very narrow margin, but at the end of the night it was over 300,000 votes. It's 29 electoral college votes to Trump. It was a state he really needed to win, and of course a state he calls home since he changed his residency to Mar-a-Lago, the Winter White House. Nonetheless, in the bigger picture, we are still waiting for Georgia to come back with just those last couple of 100,000 ballots.
What's your impression as to the kind of the way people talk to the polls? I mean, I remember reading about one outlying pollster who was still calling it this year for Trump. He called it for Trump last time round. He seemed to be the only one. And one of his theories was that people always lie to the pollsters, or particularly Trump voters would. Is that your impression, that people were kind of not prepared to admit to voting Trump, or do you think it would be something different that would have skewed the results that the pollsters were getting?
Well, I mean, let's go back in time. Over the past few weeks here in Florida, the lead was for Joe Biden by about 3.84%. The margin of error is around the same, but they got it wrong. And after 2016, we all went through it. I'm sure you did too. It was really wrong. So people just simply don't trust the polls for various different reasons. The pollsters may not be reaching the people that they need to reach. People may not be giving honest answers, but I think 4 years into the Trump presidency, if you're a Trump supporter, you're pretty loud about it. So, you know, throughout this entire process, I certainly haven't been trusting or making any kind of predictions based on the polls. It's hard facts, votes, and results that really matter at the end of the day. And they got it wrong here in Florida, although I have to say it was within that margin of error, so perhaps not unexpected. But Trump, you know, he made that lead. From 2016 was 100,000 or so votes. Now it was over 300,000 votes. So they really did get it wrong outside of that margin of error.
Andy Gallagher, thank you very much indeed. Now, as we reported earlier, Biden has been declared the winner in Wisconsin, taking the state from Donald Trump. Let's go to Natasha Konaim live in Madison. Talk us through the gaps there. I mean, Biden has been talking about how actually the margin there this time is similar in his favour as it was for Trump last time round. But Trump doesn't seem to want to listen to that particular argument at this stage. He's going for litigation.
Correct. Once again, it is a very tight race in the state of Wisconsin. Biden, though, appears to have won the state's 10 electoral college votes by 20,000 votes. He edged ahead today as absentee ballots were counted in the cities of Milwaukee, Green Bay, and Kenosha. Now, this was a priority for the Biden camp. When Trump won Wisconsin in 2016, he did so by less than 23,000 votes, and he had the distinction of being the first Republican presidential candidate to win the state of Wisconsin in more than 30 years. So Wisconsin was a priority for the Democratic Party, and this story, as far as the party is concerned, is one of a comeback. In the 4 years since 2016, the party has pumped in quite a bit of resources in an attempt to get the state back in the Democratic column. Reacting to the fact that Biden appears to have won Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Democratic Party chairman said that Trump leaned in personally, and voters who don't like voter suppression rose up. Organizers worked magic. That is a quote. Now, a Trump campaign manager is calling for a recount. He also said, without citing any specific evidence, that there were, quote, voter irregularities in several counties in Wisconsin. He also said that, quote, public polling is a voter suppression tactic. Now, about that recount, in the state of Wisconsin, you can call for a recount if the gap between the two top vote getters is less than 1%. So what would happen in this case is the Trump campaign would pay for that recount. They'd have to pay for it unless the margin ended up being less than 0.25%. Recounts in the state of Minnesota during a presidential election are not new. In 2016, a Green Party candidate paid $2.5 million for a recount. Wisconsin, like other states around the country, has had legal challenges going into Election Day. Last week, the Supreme Court ruled that unlike it had planned, the state was not going to be able to continue to count absentee ballots through November 6th, even if they were postmarked by the end of the polls closing on November 3rd. The reason for that was because we are in the midst of a pandemic, and the U.S. Postal Service has had a lot of delays. It's worth noting that Wisconsin is having a resurgence of the pandemic. Right now, it's considered a red zone. But in any event, you talked at the beginning about the gap in 2016 being very similar to the gap this year in 26 less than 1%.
Natasha Honaim, thank you very much indeed. Well, however this election is decided, it's going to have an impact on international relations. Michael Boserkiw is a global affairs analyst. He says if Biden wins, he'll have a unique opportunity to reshape his foreign policy.
I think President Trump will go down in history for an interesting thing he did, and that is he basically, from previous presidents and from the Obama administration, things like the UN, gridlock within NATO, our approach to China, to Russia. So I think Biden will have a very interesting opportunity now to come in and let's see how that works, for example, with Vladimir Putin in Russia, who always seems to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of any American president and often gets his way. So it will be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks and months with the Biden presidency.
Well, let's speak to Julie Norman, a lecturer in politics and international relations at University College. The Biden presidency, which we obviously don't yet know, but if it is, what kind of areas of difference do you see shaping up in the next 4 years?
Well, Lauren, I think there will be a couple of key areas. In terms of foreign policy, where we'll probably see it first is in 2 areas. First, in terms of Biden's commitment to climate change agreements, especially rejoining the Paris Climate Accords. And secondly, in terms of the U.S.'s engagement with the JCPOA and the Iran nuclear. Much of a shift in policy substance as much as style. Right now, we'll still expect Biden to follow Trump in terms of being tough on China, in pushing for better relations in the Middle East, and also for engaging with our NATO allies, but in a way that's much more cooperative, one that's focused on multilateralism, and one that's just a bit more stable and predictable in general.
And just to go back to the race, what's your prediction for the next few hours and days?
Well, that's certainly what everyone is waiting to find out. And we heard from President Trump today that he would not be shy about pushing this to the courts, and indeed is already instigating some challenges in the states of Wisconsin and Michigan. However, that would really only go to the Supreme Court in a rare instance of a state-level court decision going up to the Supreme Court. And that would probably only be if it was just one state, just coming down to one state. And so I think it's unlikely. Right now, Biden is just got Michigan, got Wisconsin earlier tonight. It looks like Arizona and Nevada are leaning towards him, in which case he would hit that crucial 270 mark. But of course, we won't know until all the votes are counted.
How surprised are you at the performance of Trump in in this particular race?
Well, not too surprised. In fact, this is one scenario that was expected. Obviously, the polls suggested that Biden would have. In fact, if you look at the margin of error that was in some of these polls, if we remember the margin of error errors from 2016, it was pretty known that some of these races would be quite close. And so many expected that we would not have an answer on Election Day and would really be facing what we're facing now, waiting for some of these final battleground states to finish counting those mail-in ballots before we'd have a decision.
And tell us about the picture in the Senate.
Well, indeed, it was a disappointing day and night for Democrats in terms of Senate races. Democrats were hoping to retake the Senate and, in fact, have not really seen much success there. Republicans are still holding on with a very slim, decisive shift in power there. It's looking more likely that Republicans will still hold on to the Senate. And Democrats also lost some seats in the House, even though they're maintained for a strong showing. A bit of a disappointment.
What about the future, though? I mean, whoever wins, it's an incredibly divided country. These results, the tightness of the results suggest whoever wins in terms of trying to heal some of those divisions.
Well, I think that's such a crucial question, because what this election shows is that the country really is split 50-50 between people who have supported Trump and people who are critical of him. The way that Americans are really just living in kind of two political spheres right now. And whoever is victorious will need to take that into account in terms of overcome some of the polarization that we've really seen manifest in this election and try and move things forward from this rather low point that we've been at.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Julie Norman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We head into a second lockdown to drive down coronavirus cases.
The harvest is underway, bumper harvest in New South Wales. It might temporarily have to halt. Significant rains going through Victoria and New South Wales, heading towards Sydney. It's already dropped the temperature in Melbourne by 15 degrees compared with a couple of days ago. Forecasts in Sydney will see some drop in temperature, but it's the wind that'll be most noticeable with that rain. And the wind on the coast tends. Wales benefits from that southerly breeze anyway, all the way up to the border with Queensland, leaving behind cooler weather with sunshine. Although cool is not the word used to describe Perth. Despite the showers, it's been up to the low 30s and it's there again, and that's during Friday. The change of seasons slow in eastern, but over water, probably not affecting even the Philippines the next few days. We haven't really got much ingress of winter. It's sunshine for most, for Japan, the Korean Peninsula and China, though there is some increase in the cloud in the western side of China. As for India,
a secret agent claimed by
potential walk-in or a double agent will always assume the worst.
Why they're still under wraps.
Al Jazeera World tells the story of a man of many secrets. Ashraf Marwan, death of a super spy on Al Jazeera.
Homes for the elderly became ground zero.
They cut corners, things don't get done, and people die as a result.
Fault Lines reveals how a troubled industry imploded under the weight of the
American way.
Tells us what kind of people we are.
When COVID hit, America's nursing home night.
headline of the top stories here on Al Jazeera. The race to the White House, Joe Biden, after he won the states of Wisconsin and Arizona. The results from 5 states are still outstanding. In an address earlier on Wednesday, Biden said he believes it's clear his campaign has won enough states to clinch the White House. Biden's top campaigners announced it has filed a suit to halt vote counting in the states of Pennsylvania and Michigan. They've also requested a recount in Wisconsin. We're joined by Conservative commentator Rina Shah. She joins us live from Reston, Virginia by Skype. Thanks very much for being with us. So presumably these moves to go to court by the Trump campaign, that was to be expected. Tell us how you think that's going to play out.
You know, I think these threats of taking it to the courts right now just are rather nonsensical. We don't know because that lever actually hasn't formally been pulled, given that states are still counting. What the president really wants right now is for certain states to stop counting. He wants Pennsylvania and Michigan to probably stop counting. And in Pennsylvania, he's leading, but he could fall behind. And in Michigan, he probably can't catch up there. So then we're looking at where he wants counting to continue in Arizona, where he's behind, and Nevada, where he's behind. But this recount, where he wants it most, is Wisconsin, where he's actually lost. And so that's kind of very important here because the Republican National Chairwoman is from the state of Wisconsin. And I'm sorry, she's from Michigan, but a great many of the supporters, the previous chairperson was from Wisconsin. Senators like Ron Johnson, former Congressman Sean Duffy, some of his most fervent advocates and supporters are from Wisconsin. So I think it's a really emotional blow. This president tends to do things emotionally. And so, again, I know that both sides have lawyers already, but right now it just doesn't make any sense. He's saying in Pennsylvania, for example, he wanted his lawyers to go in last night and stop the count. Right now we're seeing videos in Michigan and Detroit where his supporters have gone into locations where ballots are being counted saying stop the count. Again, nonsensical. So let's talk about the facts of what this president actually has done to get us to where we are today. Number one, he's claimed that mail-in voting encourages voter fraud and election theft. Heard that mail-in ballots couldn't be counted before Wednesday morning. And that's in certain states, at least 3 states like Pennsylvania, where Republican legislatures have done that. And fourthly, he's demanded to know the results on election night, last night. That is just not possible in our system. What is happening right now is typical of what has happened in so many years past. Ballots do get counted after election day is over.
So tell me, why, if this is all kind of normal procedure in some ways, that these votes should continue like this, and you think this is the wrong decision to go to court, why are the Republicans not making any noises about saying that we should allow these votes to be counted? Why are we hearing nothing from Republicans about this?
Well, what they have seen in these past 4 years, elected Republicans like those I mentioned who've been elected to the Senate and to the House, they have completely bowed at the altar of President Trump. They have accepted that he was the person who made it out of a huge pack of establishment elected officials who were running for the nomination in 2015 into 16. So when he emerged victorious, what Republicans really did was get in line behind him. And what they did to people like myself, a lifelong Republican who was at the local level and elected to the Republican National Convention. When we did not accept this president during even his candidacy, when he was a presumptive nominee for the Republicans, they told us that we were not Republicans and that we better fall in line. And so that's, again, something I've seen in these 4 years. And we have vote totals right now that are really actually proving that more Republicans have fallen in line behind this president and support him in greater numbers than they did in 2016. And now that's when we get down to the demographics of white women, for example. But one really big fact we should not discount is that Biden's popular vote lead an hour ago when I checked was 3 million, something like 2.2%. And it had surpassed Clinton's popular vote lead of 2.9 million. And so that was, again, when you look at 2016 and what Hillary Clinton's vote lead was, how she lost the presidency, even though she won about 3 million popular votes, more than Donald Trump, we're seeing Joe Biden has had a real success. So although we don't have a definitive winner right this moment, although last night caused a great deal of consternation in the minds of Democrats, it's very important to see what has been accomplished. And I think the Democrats should see this for a win, albeit, yes, it was a close race. But really what we're seeing is a Republican Party that has stayed really true to their man. So they're not going to step out of line and criticize the absolutely un-American speech he gave in the early morning hours today. They're not going to criticize the effort he's taking by saying, I'm going to get my lawyers into this, I'm going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. They're going to stand by and say nothing, because that's what they've done for 4 years.
So, yeah, I mean, naturally, also, presumably a lot of them are thinking that he did better than they expected. So perhaps,
true.
What would you say the kind of factor has been in terms of people continuing to vote for Trump in spite of the problems of the pandemic, in spite of the problems of the economy? What's the magic ingredient, you think, for him?
That is an incredible question, and it is very much $1 million question, because I've been doing a lot of soul searching these past 4 years to figure out, do I leave this party? I made my entire career in this party, but I was ostracized as the first ever delegate in the country to speak out against the now president, and I couldn't quite figure out then what it was, and I figured out that really what really was at play was that Republicans had made a decision that they were willing to accept an imperfect man, somebody that has been married